All right, Coach, welcome to the show. We're here at BRAVEHAVEN Studios in beautiful Salt Lake City. And before we get talking, I just want to talk to all of our buddies out there who have been viewing us. This last week, I want to thank all of you guys for coming aboard. We actually, on my Twitter, we picked up 5,700 followers this last week, and really excited about that. We had over 3,700 hits on CoachScottFields.com. Some international countries that we picked up. I think just having Julius Nwasu, a former San Antonio Spur, who played for me in Lebanon and won a championship. I think with him being on, it ended up bringing him some viewers from Nigeria and Ghana. And then we had people from the Dominican Republic joined us. We had Arab Emirates, so Dubai started watching us this last week. And then Thailand, and also down in South America and Colombia. So those countries joined us we had viewership from, of course, Venezuela, Lebanon, Russia. We had Australia, Austria, Sweden. So we're getting international viewership right here out of Salt Lake City, and it's just been an amazing time. We're having a lot of fun with it. We've got a poll question for tonight. So anybody can get on CoachScottFields.com or hit me on Twitter at Scott_Fields. The poll question for tonight, and we'll even start off with this, Coach. The NCAA has the one and done rule, and curious on your guys' thoughts on the one and done rule. Please hit us on Twitter. Let us know your thoughts or perspectives on it. We've had quite a few comments already come in on Twitter, and we'll be reading those off. But we are so lucky, blessed, and fortunate to have a friend of mine, Coach Frank Layden, who in this part of the world needs no introduction. He, Coach of the Year, 83, 84 in the NBA, Executive of the Year, 83, 84, was also a J. Walker Kennedy Award winner, and you are only one of two people that were not players that won that award for the NBA, and what a fantastic honor it is to have you with us, Coach. You and I have been friends for a long time, and for you to come in and be a part of this show, I feel just so grateful. So I thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so we're going to sit here and talk a lot of basketball and some history. And you came in, we've been talking for about 10 minutes before the show started. You were talking about Earl the Pearl Monroe's jersey there behind you. And gosh, let's just talk some basketball. You have coached at all levels. 10 years at the high school level. You coached college at your alma mater, Niagara.
Yes.
Coached WNBA and NBA.
Yes.
When did you know that you wanted to be, a basketball lifer?
Well, first of all, I played at the high school level in New York City, and the competition was tremendous. In my senior year, which was back in 50 and 51, 1950, 51, right following, during the next couple of years would be the Korean War, where a lot of youngsters were being drafted and having to go over to Korea to fight. I played for a big high school. We had about 5,000 students.
Wow.
So when you went to try out, say for first base, there'd be 100 guys there. Basketball, you had to count a lot on your reputation and what have you. And the competition was certainly very keen. Well, I was a single parent home. My mother had passed away. My dad worked 5.5 days a week. He worked on the docks, and he worked with his body, second generation Irish, came over with hardly any education at all, though he did a lot of things. He knew how to read, and he read well, and he wrote well. I always remember, how his handwriting was so keen, and his spelling, and he was proud of that. And so he had, I'd say, about a 6th grade education, but he was self-educated. I remember him getting the New York Times every Sunday and reading it all week. Well, anyway, I went to school, public grammar school, PS 185. We didn't even have a name for it. We had a number. And from there, I went to Fort Hamilton High School, which was a neighborhood school. And I started I made the JVs as a freshman. And then as a sophomore, I played on the varsity. Played varsity baseball also, and did the same thing in my junior year when something very unusual happened. is that there was at that particular time, the teachers who took care of extracurricular activities, and that was from the paper to the theaters to the clubs in the school to the women's sports, whatever it was, they went on strike. In New York City, city employees can't strike, cops can't strike, firemen can't strike, teachers can't strike, but they don't have to do extracurricular work, like for instance coaching. So here I'm going into my senior year hoping that I'm going to maybe get a scholarship to college.
Okay.
I had a wonderful coach, Mr. Phil Drucker, and I still call him Mr., even after he's passed away. But I played baseball and basketball. I had a wonderful junior year, and this hasn't been equaled yet, that I led New York City in home runs and scoring in the same year.
Wow.
All right? And so the home run record has been broken, obviously, afterwards. Kranepool, who was the first baseman for the Mets, broke it. And the scoring record, of course, has been now. I think I won the scoring title, averaging around 70 points a game. Now I'm sure they score 35 points a game. But and my coach encouraged me. He knew my dad didn't have the money, and he said, if you study hard, and you keep improving, and I think you got a chance to get a scholarship to college, and I'll help you as long as you help yourself. That was great advice, and I learned by that, and I was indebted to this man. A lot of people like to give credit to their fathers or their mothers. Of course, I didn't have a mother, and my father, he deserves the credit that he supported me all the way. I mean, I always had a glove. I always had cleats. I always had good sneakers. I mean, he always had money to give me. We didn't have a lot of money in the family, but I always had money to play sports.
Yes, sir.
And he thought there was a lot of value in it. So anyway, there in my senior year, no sports.
Wow.
No baseball, no basketball. So I got a call from a fellow who was a coach in the Flatbush Boys Club. Everybody's heard of the Boys and Girls Clubs.
Sure.
And I went down there, and lo and behold, some of the stars from around Brooklyn were there. He had called up these people and said, "Hey, come and play here." And so we ended up playing together. I was playing with better players than I would have if I had been just playing against high school kids. I was playing with and against the best players in the city every game, and then we had about out of maybe a 30 game schedule, maybe 15 of the games were against college freshman teams.
Wow.
So it was a great way to get exposure, and also to get a feeling, can you play at this level? And so anyway, it turned out that I had decided to go to Long Island University under Clab B, who was the coach there. And I used to, after school, go and work out at Long Island University, which was right in the heart of Brooklyn. Saying it was Long Island University was a stretch. But we worked out at a YMCA that had a big gymnasium, a central YMCA, and that's where. And then we worked out in the Garden a lot, because that was really LIU's home court, Madison Square Garden. Well, anyway, everything was going along good, and one day I came in, and they said, "Well, we've been hit." And they gathered us together, those that I had a letter of intent to go to LIU. I liked their baseball program. They played Nebbits Field, and I thought I'd play baseball, basketball. If you didn't, they didn't have dorms, so they used to give you the cash that would take care of your living, and I could bring that home to my family, my two sisters and my dad, help them out. When I remember the Picarello was the name of the assistant coach, and he got us all together. There was 7 of us, and he said, "Fellas, LIU is not going to play basketball anymore because it was the time of the scandals." Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people out there might not have remembered, but back in the late 40s and 50s, New York was rocked by gambling, and a lot of the college players were picked up. CCNY, that won both the NCAA and the NIT in the same year, all right, and had great players. 6 of their players were arrested. LIU, who might have had one of the great college teams of all time. And after a while, it not only was in New York with LIU, NYU, CCNY, City College of New York, Manhattan College. It was all over the place. LIU, of course, and then Kentucky was involved, and there were several other schools that were involved across the country, and a lot of those schools chose not to play anymore, at least for a cool down period.
Yeah.
NYU has never recovered, and that's one of the biggest and wealthiest universities in the world. They still play Division three sports. So anyway, when that happened, I went to St. John's, and I asked down there, at that time, Joe Lapchick was coaching, and I asked about going there. I had an offer from them earlier, and they said, we've given out all our scholarships. So I said, but we'll help you. We have a sister school, Niagara University, and Niagara University used to come into the Garden and play. In fact, they beat that great CCNY team in the Garden.
Wow.
And I said, well, so the coach called me that night. They called the Coach John Taps Gallagher. He called me that night, and I took it. I never saw the school. It's located in Niagara Falls, and I decided to go there. And it was typical of a lot of little Catholic schools in those days. We had about 2,200 students, and our arena sat 18,000. We were like Villanova and Seton Hall and the teams that play St. John's and play in New York. So anyway, I went there, and it was the perfect place for me. I played. Hubie Brown was my roommate, who's now the coach, and many years now he's a great broadcaster.
Yes, sir.
Larry Costello, who not only was a great player, but then coached the Milwaukee Bucks with Oscar Robinson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the World Championship. So I got to play with them, and the Korean War was on, as mentioned. I went in the ROTC. I got commissioned upon graduation, 1955. The war had just ended, but I had a commitment to go into the service. I was thinking then of playing baseball, where I was better in baseball than I was basketball, and I had some feelers from the Giants and the Dodgers earlier, but I went in the service. And we played pretty high-level baseball and basketball in the service for 2 years, but I got married, and now I was 25 years old, a little old to start out, and I called my coach, and I said to him, he was a fine man. He was a religious man. He kept everything in perspective. He was well spoken. He was well read. He was a Brooklynite himself, just like I was, and I'd coached at Niagara for some 35 years. Let me tell you this: he coached at Niagara for 35 years and never got a technical.
Wow.
35 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they used to call him the gentleman coach. He just was a man.
Well deserved.
And and even, he would always say, don't blame the refs. Don't blame this. We're not going to win if we're selfish. He had all the terms that later on seemed so important to me. Well, anyway, I called him up and I said, Coach, what do I do? I'm getting out of the Army. I had gotten married while I was in the Army. My wife was pregnant with Scott, the fellow who's the coach now. And I said, what do I do? And he said, well, why don't you try coaching? So I said, I don't know, And I have to say this. I always saw coaches as poor. Uh-huh. They never made a lot of money. And they always worked hard. And I said, gee, I don't know if that's what I want to do. He says, why don't you try it? So anyway, about a month later, I had about 2 months to go to get out of the Army, when this little school in Long Island called me up. And it was a little Catholic school. It would be much like Judge Memorial is here in, or Juan Diego here in Utah. And I went out there on a Sunday afternoon, and I met with the principal, who was a nun. All right, and the athletic director was a man. He said, we play a high level of basketball here. Well, they sure did. They were very much, like Powell Memorial in New York City was a powerhouse, or Morgan Wooten's DeMatha High School.
That's right.
And they played out of the state, and they had 400 students, but they could have played the Knicks. They had such good players. So anyway, he said, why don't you, when you come out, and I didn't have a job. So I listened to my coach, and I said, well, why don't I try it? So it caused me, I had to teach. So I had to teach history. In New York, you have to have a master's degree to teach. So I had to go back to school. I got a temporary certificate to teach. I taught history. And I had homeroom, bus duty, study hall, lunch duty, and eventually, after 10 years, I ended up being assistant principal. And the first weekend that the varsity scrimmage, it turned out I was the junior high coach. I thought I knew everything, and I found out that I didn't. The first week, the first team was Long Beach High School, and who was the star of the team? Larry Brown.
Okay.
Who later on was an Olympian and,
Yes,
and a great
sir.
pro player and a great coach. Still is coaches SMU.
Fantastic teacher.
And then Mark Heyman, Art Heyman, who was a great star at Duke and played with the Knicks. He was on Oceanside High School. We played both of those schools 2 days in a row. On our team, our best player was a guy by the name of Billy Donovan. This is Billy Donovan, the coach of Florida, was his father.
Okay.
And his mother was a cheerleader. and Billy Donovan actually, the young Billy Donovan, the one that's on Florida, actually played for the Jazz. We drafted him. Mm-hmm. And he came in and played for us for a while. And is, of course, a very, very good coach in his own right.
Sir.
Well, anyway, I caught on and I said, I like this. I like after school. I was like the kids. I was looking forward all day long to getting out there with them. And in schools like that, you get the same kids. I was assistant football coach, assistant to the JVs, and then I was coaching. I was the freshman basketball coach, and then I was the JV baseball coach, and I was having fun. It was a lot of fun. And I found out some lessons about coaching and teaching and life was that it was so much easier when the players wanted to be there. Not everybody wants to be in math class or wants to be in Spanish class or history, whatever it is, but they all wanted to be. And it was democracy in action because you had to try out to make the team. The best survived, the best went here, the others went down here, and it was almost like life. And you have to obey the rules and what have you. Now, you asked about it being life. I liked baseball as much as I like basketball. Now I like baseball better.
Yeah.
I liked football. Football requires a lot of teamwork. A lot of people doing a lot of different things to have the guy with the ball have success. And so there's a lot of sacrifice on people's parts. And in basketball, I like it, but it involved too fewer people to really sometimes make an impact. But I started just like my coach did, Coach Drucker, who said, someday you may go to college. And I try to say to our players, I don't know if you're going to play Division I. I don't know if you're going to play Division III. Maybe you won't play basketball. You won't play football, basketball. But think about college. Start thinking now about where you want to go, what you want to do with your life, and what design are you taking? Are you going to college just to take up space, or are you going there with a specific motive beyond playing
with a
professional basketball? There's got to be purpose in your life.
Sir.
And you know what? One day I said to myself, and I said to my wife, Barbara, you know what? I found what I want to do. And it had nothing to do with money. I've always told people, I never saw a Brinks truck in a funeral procession. You can't take it with you. And, everywhere I went and every age I was, I always had a car. I always had a house. I always had, some money to get pizza and go out and go to movies or have my kids get equipment and stuff. I mean, that never mattered. In fact, even when I got to the Jazz, I can never remember signing a contract. It was always a handshake. I never, I just, I got a raise. I didn't even know it, or get some money. I remember a player saying to me the first time we made the playoffs, and a good player, a tough guy, said that the check we got was for $5,000 for 2 rounds of the playoffs. And he said, gee, is this all we get for all that work? So I said, no, this is what we get for all that fun.
Yeah, there you go.
I said, there's guys dying in warfare and stuff like that, and there's people starving, and here you were paid a lot of money just to play basketball.
Right.
So that was the beginning of it. I never thought of myself as a lifer. When people ask me, what did you do for a living, I always say I was a school teacher.
There you go.
And a school teacher that happened to coach basketball on the side. But the fallout of basketball, if I had to say this, it not only provided a good life for my family and myself, and I didn't care about the accolades or the thing. I always thought if we win, we'd all get something, We'd make a little more money, we'd get some awards, our first playoff team, we had the league's leading shot blocker. We had the league's leading three-point shooter. We had the steal maker. We had the league's leading rebounder and shot blocker. We had we had a comeback player of the year and the high scorer of the league in Adrian Dantley. And I realized
Another DeMatha guy.
You put those guys together, and they made a very good team. They all had roles. They all made their roles very good. But to me, we all have an obligation to go beyond basketball. With the pros, we had chapel service. A lot of players go away for the first time in their lives with a lot of money. Then we had a wives club, and we took the wives and tried to get them back into college and get them focused on doing things they wanted to do before school. We had a bonus for players who went back to college and finished, got their degrees. Ricky Green, Adrian Dantley went back to Notre Dame. His mother told me she was prouder when she saw him get his degree at Notre Dame than she was when he got his gold medal in the Olympics.
Wow.
We started book clubs, we started theater clubs, and we'd go on the road and we'd watch, go to plays. I had one kid who was born in New York, and he said to me, we went over to Broadway to see a play, and he came out and he said, wow, how long has this been going on? He had never
Introduced him to a new world.
Yeah,
huh?
he had lived in New York and had never been to a play in his life, So, and so we tried to do that with the idea that basketball is temporary. This is permanent.
There you go.
And you've got to have appreciation of a lot of things, and money won't buy them. Money won't buy smart.
Yeah.
Yes,
sir.
And and dumb won't win. So we were very simple. Coaches a lot of times say, "What about your rules? How do you have the rules?" I said, "I never had a rule. I had the same rules I had in life." I said, I used to say to the players, be on time. We can't do anything if you're not here.
Yeah.
All right? So be on time. Play hard. That'll make up for a lot of shortcomings that we may have in skills. And play smart. And if we do that, and teams, we see the old Celtic teams or the current Spurs team, unselfish and smart.
Yes, sir.
And then go out and do the best you can. Let's say, well, what if the players stayed out? I used to say to players, you're men. I'm not going to treat you like Boy Scouts unless you prove to me that you can handle it. I said, nothing good happens after midnight.
Yeah.
So if you're out after midnight and you get in trouble, all right, then I'm going to have to take serious action.
Yeah.
I'd have to listen. When the Lord gave us the rules of life, they were kind of short, weren't they? The commandments. I mean, he didn't give us. The NCAA gave us. They got this. They got this many
400-page pamphlet.
But here we have 10 simple rules. So it takes common sense, and if you don't understand, you don't get on board, then you don't play for the Jazz.
Yeah.
You don't play for Niagara.
Right.
And you wouldn't play for Seton Hall High School where I was at. We did it when we came. Sneakers were tied, socks were pulled up, all right, our shirts were tucked in, and we came to work every day.
There you go.
And sometimes we worked longer and harder than other people, and it paid off. And sometimes there were disappointments. It wasn't always winning, and sometimes there's going to be losing, and you got to handle that. And I always remember this, and I've been talking too much, so I'll stop.
No, are you kidding me? Great life
Pete
lessons.
Carroll said an interesting thing. He says, in America, we have to learn to be better winners. He said, if losing develops character, winning reveals it.
Hey, there you go.
And and so this dance is in the end zone and stuff.
Yeah.
We want to act like, when we win, we congratulate the opponent. Because they made it possible, and I think that's the lessons that we have to learn. We can't forget about that,
Well,
and I used to have things. I would have got arrested if I was coaching today. I was in high school, and I had crew cut or B cut.
Uh-huh.
If you tried out for the team, you had to have a crew cut.
Yeah.
You know, I had mothers come to me, oh, I can't cut my kid's hair. Well, then let him play for your team. If he plays for my team, he's got to have a crew cut. You got to look for sacrifice. And then I used to have a contract. And the mothers and fathers had to sign a contract with me. I couldn't live with the kids, but they had a guarantee that night before a game the kid was home. They weren't going to be drinking. They weren't going to do this. And I'm sure some did, and some maybe did it and played good.
Yeah.
You know, I understand that. You know, but you know, I think it was a good idea to know that life is going to be, you're going to be judged by the rules that are set in front of you and how you obey them. You know.
There you go. Well,
so,
Coach, I'll tell you what, it's refreshing and powerful to hear you talk about the principles and the ethics and the integrity, you know, of the game and how you kept it simple. I read some of the things that came out of this weekend, you know, where they had the 1983-84 team come back and they were interviewing the players and they talked about how you kept it simple, but yet you kept it fun. And, you know, you had Thurl Bailey, who was just coming in from North Carolina State, who just won a national championship with Coach Jimmy Valvano. You know, you had Daryl Griffith. You know, you had Mark Eaton. You had, you know, Adrian Dantley. You know, again, talking about DeMatha, and we had a former DeMatha strength coach with us on our last show, Alan Stein, who is one of the best in the business. And love to hear the principles that you're setting forth.
Yeah, you know, I talked about discipline, you know, a simple thing, be on time, be dressed right, ready to go to work. I'd rather do a few things well than do a lot of things poorly.
Hey.
And basketball, compared to football, all right, is a simple game, all right? It's it's a game, and you know, it starts with self-sacrifice, a commitment to be in great physical shape. You know, and you know, I think that that's very important, and that the players understand. And by the way, I am wholly against one-sport athletes. I love to see my basketball team play football, and they say, "Well, they're worried they're going to get hurt." Well, that's life. So you might cross the street and get hurt too. You know,
right.
I can't worry about that, but I think you learn something. Everybody should be tackled in their life. You know, everybody should be joking and whoa, what was that just hit me? You know, and you should tackle people once in a while. I like mental and physical toughness, and I think football does that. Baseball, you know, where to be a student of the game of baseball is so important. But I like to see my athletes. I don't like the idea that all athletes do now is lift weights and play football. Lift weights and, you know, I saw a little kid get on my elevator where I live. And he has football because he's going out to football practice one Saturday morning. And I said, "Where do you play, son?" You know, I mean, he must have been 11 years old. He says, "I'm a kicker." Yeah, you're a kicker? You're 11 years old. What do you know you are? You know, maybe you're the next great wide receiver in history. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and so I like kids to be able to do it. And I think one of the things we are missing nowadays is the multiple athlete. You know, people forget LeBron James got football scholarships.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah, Allen Iverson did too.
Allen Iverson was a better football player than he was.
Yes, he was.
Player.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, it happens so often, but the consistency, too, of cooperation. I remember when I was teaching history. You know, kids would say, "Does spelling count?" I said, "Damn right it counts." I said, "Because the English teacher is one of my teammates."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, does handwriting count? I said, "Sure, if I can't read it, it's wrong." You know, because, you know, I don't know, now kids, even my own grandchildren say me, there's something about, well, you know, they can't read cursive, they can't read writing.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to be printed for them, or they gotta get it out of a machine. Yeah. And that's a shame, you know, because it's wonderful to be able to read Lincoln's writings in his own handwriting.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard, but there's something to that. I wasn't difficult in trying to tie in. I didn't punish athletes with the idea that if you didn't do this, you wouldn't get that. You know, I tried to keep them separated. To me, to hang those things over the head of an athlete may not be fair in terms of how the other students are related. Now, I'm not saying I favored athletes. But for instance, let's say we had an athlete who broke a rule, a school rule, a civil rule. They'll take care of it. All right. But now it's within our family, and my idea, instead of punishing them and saying you can't play, you know what I do? Make them do something constructive.
There you go.
Go feed the poor.
There you go.
Go help pay.
Give back to the
in
community,
the
yeah.
habitats. Give back to the community and do something that helps. Taking that away from kids doesn't make any sense to me at all. You know?
What are they learning from it?
Yeah, they're not learning anything from it. But if they get out and they have to feed the poor and they see the poor and they say, "Whoa, I don't want to be in this." I
realize they're kind of fortunate, huh?
Yeah, and so that was constructive. And I used to fight academicians about this. They'd say, "Well, you can't do that. You don't have to throw the play." I had him in my senior year. I had a wonderful little point guard when I was coaching at Niagara, and a teacher came and said that he wanted to flunk him, and I said, "Wait a minute, where are you flunking him? You know where this kid came from? He came from Harlem. He was in a family of 9.
Wow.
There never was a book in his house. His father and mother couldn't read."
Yeah.
I said, "So what are you going to do? Take basketball away from him? Give him extra homework. Make him come to school on Saturday. Do something. This is a kid." I said, "You know how much he has improved just to get to a D?"
Yeah.
I said, "He isn't one of those kids that went to prep schools and Catholic schools and, their parents could help them and they had tutors and they had all these things, all right?" And I said, "Al is a fragile guy. You take this away from him, I don't know where he's going." Wow.
Yeah.
And the dean said, "That makes too much sense."
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I try to think that way, and then be able to deal with people who should know better. I mean, the country. Let's take for instance. I'll just make this a quick phrase. That the country in say in the NCAA and in big time Division I football, it's out of hand.
Oof.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I hear you.
It's out of hand. And the presidents of the schools and the chancellors and the board of directors and everything are afraid to step in and say there is something wrong here. Yeah. We have to bring it back. Now, maybe years ago, if they had given coaches tenure or what have you, but instead we reward a degree of excellence with money. Yeah. And money talks. That isn't what sports are supposed to be about. Yeah. They're supposed to be about my little point guard Al, who was at one time then eventually graduated. He graduated in 4 years.
There you go.
And now is a successful businessman. And I think if it hadn't been for me and it hadn't been for basketball and Niagara for that matter, I think he would have been a real failure. Mm. So people used to ask me too. Another question is that, what kind of a team did you have this year? All right, what kind of a team did Pineview have this year? Well, they had a great team. All right. Oh, how are we measuring that? Well, by wins and losses. I want to see what their team is like 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. How many of them went to college? How many of them graduated? How many of them have successful marriages or are now living good lives and making contributions to society? That's how you measure the success of teams over, sure, you want to win now, you want to win everything else, but, sometimes real good teams have real bad people.
True.
And sometimes greedy coaches and what have you. So it's stepping back. The advice I would give to any coaches that are out there listening, and I don't care what level it was. I coached 10 years in high school, 10 years in college, and 13 years in the pros. One of those years with the women's team, and I apologize for that because I was too old. I wasn't ready for them, and I didn't do a good job. But I stayed for a year, and it was very good for me. But the thing is that remember that teachers are teachers. Coaches are teachers. Yeah. And whatever, people will listen to them. They have a pulpit that no one else has. A responsibility to the players who are going to do everything they can. I mean, imagine what kind of mathematicians we'd have if we could make them run suicide. You know? Oh, you couldn't square the hypotheses. Huh? All right, on the line, let's go, you know. Or supposing you taught math and it was 4 hours a day, or 3.5 hours, like we do in basketball. Boy, we'd get good mathematicians.
Yes, we would.
Yeah,
Yes,
and,
sir.
You know, we'd cure cancer tomorrow. You know, if Vince Lombardi ran the country, I mean, you know, we would have won in every area we went into.
There you go.
So,
there you go.
well, anyway, I mean, I can't say anymore. What's your second question?
Yeah, no, this has been outstanding because I mean, again, you're talking about principle and you're talking about integrity, and you know, go ahead.
The X's and O's are simple.
Yeah,
particularly in
just
basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a great football coach, all right, could talk about how to play tight end for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Basketball's a simple game.
Yeah.
You know, conditioning, unselfishness, shot selection, you know, all of the fundamental things are what eventually will win for you. People used to ask me, what's the difference in coaching in high school? And so my ex-high school players would come, they want to see the pros play or something, bring their kids with them. And I'd say, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's fundamentals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's spacing. It's you know, it's movement without the ball. It's you know, everything is exactly the same. The only thing different is, at each level, the quality of athlete grows.
Right.
You know, they get bigger and stronger and what have you. And I don't know where that's going, because now we're talking about diet, and we're talking about weightlifting and what have you. So, you know, I mean, whoever thought that the day would come along that say, you know, a guy, I mean, we thought Will Chamberlain was something. But when you see LeBron James, he's like a freight train.
Oh, my
You
goodness.
know, he shoots outside, shoots inside, blocks, he jumps, and everything. And there's a lot of those guys out there. The quality of our athletes has jumped. The other thing that was very interesting what you were talking about. In the last 25 years, the most amazing thing to me is the global effect basketball has had.
There you go.
They're playing basketball everywhere.
Yes, they are.
I went over to give clinics in Holland, and we had something like 900 countries represented. It was like speaking to the UN. The guys had earphones on. They would translate, interpreters and everything else. I mean, people interested in basketball. And you know what? I went over there cocky. I was a cocky American. I knew this and everything else. And I found out these guys knew all this.
Yeah.
You know, they knew how to front a big man. They knew how to, you know, they absolutely were. Well, they needed the other things as to what makes your teams great. And some, you know, I mean, you can look at the potential in a place like China. I mean, you know, and they're doing it.
Yes,
and the Russians brought the American coaches over there. Now we're seeing, you mentioned Dubai and these places. China, very big. Right now, all the NBA teams have scouts in full time in Europe, and now we're starting to put them in Asia. And you know, after you see Lin and you know the big guy that played for Houston,
Yao Ming.
Yao Ming. I mean, so once they start playing, they have the discipline, by the way, and they play hard, and they're very coachable, the kids, and it's almost an atmosphere like you get in the military academies. You know, they're so strict in school that when they get a chance to play sports, it's a relief to them. You know?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I remember a football coach telling me that at Army. He said, our kids hit hard because they're so happy to get out of the regiment of that you have all the other times and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the global effect that we're seeing on basketball is absolutely wonderful.
Yes, sir.
You know, and everybody is playing it and playing it better. The foreign kids, I think, in a lot of ways, the coaching in Europe is better than it is here. And so, you know, the big men. You look at how many big men come to the United States and can shoot the ball.
That's right.
They shoot
face
the,
up.
They face up. They start
spread the floor.
They spread the floor. They were the ones with having the wide lane.
Yeah, the 3-second lane. Yes.
To be able to penetrate and then whip it out. You know, and then big guys making shots. our big guys, for many years, we just put them back to the basket.
Right, right.
And,
And you mentioned before, you mentioned Larry Brown, and to me, it's just the simplest thing, but all the coaches at Indiana took Rick Smits, the big 7-footer, that played at Marist from overseas in Holland, that everybody had him play with his back to the basket. Larry Brown was the first one smart enough to say, you know what, you're a face-up shooter.
Yeah.
They let him face up and shoot, and just that changed the whole dynamic of the team, and they had better spacing. But Larry Brown was a teacher, and he teaches at every level he's been. He's won in college, he's one of the pros.
Yeah, and one of the things that happens is, I used to think, people ask me who were the best coaches that I saw. I would have to go with Johnny Wooden, for the many years. And
Indiana
but you
boy.
know what? I went to see his practices, and we became close, especially in his closing years. He never lost sight of what was important. All right, and he was a teacher, just wonderful. So I ranked him number 1.
Sir.
Dean Smith was another guy who got it. He understood. He said, yeah, we're going to be great offensive players. And by the way, both of them had very good players. And I think it should be known that there's a lot of good coaches who never get a chance to coach good players.
Yeah.
A great coach is one who wins when he has good players. Nobody wins with bad players. And there's a lot of guys who don't do a good job of coaching good players, and they should get a job.
Sure.
And then the third guy was Morgan Wooten. All right, Morgan Wooten was the first guy, and he taught me to coach with the clock. When his practice started, he turned the clock on, and there was so much for this, so much for that.
Yeah.
Now I've gone to see a lot of the Spurs practices, and they are stations. Coach Popovich likes to break his teams up and work on their individual skills.
Yeah.
And it's no accident when you see how they run without the ball, because it's constantly being drilled into their heads.
Repetition.
Over.
That's right.
And of course, when kids, I used to talk, and I remember Rick Majerus, the great coach at the U, when I talked at his clinics, I used to say, what's the most important thing in basketball? What is the most important thing? Kids will say defense, rebound, this, that, everything else, baloney, shooting. We never gave a scholarship yet to a guy that averaged 5 points a game.
Yeah.
You got to put it in the basket. I mean, I get loose, but if I can't shoot, shooting. And it's amazing. People would come and watch the Jazz practice and were surprised at how much time I spent at shooting.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, guys who couldn't shoot, Karolinko, for instance, we keep him for hours afterwards to learn how to shoot. And it was Ricky Green. He was All-American at Michigan. All right, he tried out. He got drafted. He tried out. He didn't make it. He was 5 years in the minor leagues. What he learned in the minor leagues was to shoot the ball. And when he could shoot, he became a great and all-star. John Stockton, he asked me at the end of his first year, what can I do to improve my game? I said, shoot the ball, son. You've got to have range. You've got to get outside the three-point line. Because if you don't, then they're going to be playing 5 against 4 against us.
Backing off.
And the same thing with Karl Malone. Karl Malone went from the worst free throw shooter in the league to one of the best.
Yeah.
And so shooting is so important. Passing the basketball and catching it and then dribbling it. 3 simple skills.
You bet.
In baseball, hit it.
Yeah.
If you can hit, they'll find a place. They'll invent the position.
That's right.
They'll find a place if you can hit.
Yeah.
And if you can throw, they'll find a place for you. But basketball, you can practice by yourself. You work on those skills by yourself. Be in great shape. Improve your jumping ability. If you're in good shape, you don't get sick. You're not going to miss practices. You're not going to miss games. And you give yourself a chance to win.
Well, and you're talking about those things. Think of the longevity that a John Stockton and a Karl Malone had, because they kept themselves physically prepared. They were mentally tough, and they were just, you don't see players taking care of themselves like that anymore.
No, and that's why John was one of the best guys at setting a pick that I've ever seen. And
he'd get up in those guys'
ribs. He didn't care how big they were.
Yeah.
And I never forget this. Is Karl Malone. We're playing an exhibition game in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the university there. And during the game, he gets his finger bent back. I mean, my stomach turned when I
Yeah.
saw it. The doctors rushed him inside. I said to myself, "Oh, we're going to lose him now for a month. We're gonna, this is going to require surgery." That finger was back towards his wrist. He says, "Step aside." He yanked it. I yanked it back in position. Told the trainer, "Tape those fingers up." He went back and played in the second half.
Oh.
And so, some of the reporters and stuff asked, "Hey, how'd you do it? This is an exhibition game, and you're gonna play with that finger where you're concerned." He says, "You know how many people paid a lot of money and traveled a lot of miles to see me play tonight?" He goes, "I owe it to them to go out there and play."
Gotta love that, Coach.
Another story I'll tell you is about being in the team. Is Thurl Bailey. He was a second-year player with us. We were down, and Thurl was a better pro than he was a college player. Jimmy Valvano told me, he said, "He's going to get better and better, Coach. You get him. He's a racehorse. He's a thoroughbred." And so anyway, we were down in Dixie College. And like a good teacher, I always kept my students in front of me. I didn't like guys to work around. But I don't know, one day we were having a morning practice, and I was going to talk about the evening practice. And I let the players get around me in a circle. And while I was talking to them, I was saying, "Well, tonight practice is at 6, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that." When suddenly I heard, "Hey, shut up! The man's teaching us how to win!" And it was Thurl Bailey yelling at some rookies.
Oh.
And the rookies, they were probably saying, "Hey, what are we going to eat now? What are we going to do?" It's just simple stuff. But the whole thing got quiet. But it told me, we're going to have a good team this year.
That's right. There you go.
I said, these guys are listening to the man.
Yeah.
And I used to say to them, "I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but listen to me, and we're going to win a lot of games.
There you
and
go.
You're going to make a lot of money, and you're going to be very famous."
Wow. Great stuff. Well, Coach, I've always looked to you, as a mentor and a friend. You've seen my free agent tryout camps. You've gone to games that I've coached here. And, I always would try to pick your brain or, what can I do better? And, you've always given me great advice. And I've stuck to those things that you've shared with me. And it's helped me advance in my career. And I thank you for that. I can remember you telling me a couple years ago when I was observing, again, advice from you. You're like, "Hey, just, get a hold of Coach Sloan and see if you can go observe their practices." So when I was between jobs, Coach Sloan allowed me to come in and watch practices and learning the things that, he was teaching and the principles and just the fundamentals and just there's so many things that it reinforced the passion that I have. And, you said, "Hey, make it a job to get a job."
Make it a job to get a job. The other thing I always emphasize is it's got to be fun.
Yeah.
Life's too short. And if basketball is not fun, you're not going to enjoy going to practice. You're not going to enjoy
it becomes a
looking
job,
forward to
doesn't it?
Yeah. What and that goes for the parents. It should be fun when they go to games. There's too much anguish.
Yeah.
All right? And if you're a ref, the same thing. It should be fun to referee. And the relationship between the parents and the referees should be an authority thing, just like real life is. And the players the same way. Play within the rules. Play as hard as you can. I mean, I had one time, we had just lost a 7-game series to the Lakers. Might have been the greatest team in history. It was the one with Magic and Jabbar and Worthy. I mean, it was some great team. And we lost in 7 games. We took them 7 games. We lost the 7th game out in California. And someone next day, I was teeing up to play golf, and this guy says to me, "Oh, wasn't that a tragedy yesterday?" I said, "You know what a tragedy is? An airplane crash. Tragedy is what's happening to our troops over in Iraq."
Yeah.
I said, "That was just a basketball game."
Yeah.
I said, "Get over it." And the guy was a little bit surprised at my attitude. I says, "Hey, there'll always be another day, another game, or what have you." A lot of things people say, "Well, it was the toughest thing that ever happened to me." I had, when I was coaching in high school, a team that went 26-0. We went undefeated in the regular season. And how we did it, our playoffs, everybody was in the playoffs, all right? And there was 2 conferences, one Nassau County and one Suffolk County. We were in Suffolk County. And the last place team would play the first place team. Mm-hmm. And that's how they got through it. And there was 12 teams in each of the conferences, all right? And in that first game, we were playing the worst team. This was a team of future ministers. They were religious fellows and stuff like that. And we got upset. And I went in that locker room, and I saw how sad and how bad those youngsters felt because they had worked hard. And I said, fellas, what a wonderful opportunity. What a wonderful year you've had this year. I said, now today you saw what life is about. Sometimes, you know, your mom and dad are going to die, or you're going to lose a brother. Or, you know, things aren't always the way we would like them. I said, a perfect world, we would have won tonight and then continued to win. It doesn't always work that way. I said, all you do is you ask yourself, did I do the best I possibly could?
There you go.
And if you can walk off the court saying, I don't leave, I'm not taking anything with me, I'm leaving it all there, then you can live with losing.
There you go.
Yeah, because you're not going to win all the time. When Vince Lombardi said, winning is the only thing, he must have thought that when he was dying of cancer. You don't always win.
Yeah.
So, and with that, we accept checks, credit cards, any kind of income.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we've got a poll question tonight, Coach, and
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on it. You know, the NCAA right now has what they call the one and done rule. What are your thoughts or impressions, you know, initially when I say, how do you feel about the NCAA one and done rule?
In an ideal world, in an ideal situation, in which all of the athletes were going to school with one thing in mind, and that was to get a degree.
Yeah.
Remember I mentioned before, basketball is temporary.
That's right.
You know, your intellect is permanent. And, you know, it's a pleasure to see Bill Russell, you know, who's an intellectual. I mean, you know, go out and lecture and stuff like that. If the goal of the college was to make sure that those athletes were going to get the best possible education, regardless of how they played basketball, then I would say, by all means. It could change. We could go back. Remember in the days they used to have freshman basketball.
Yeah. When you was a freshman, you could only play freshman basketball.
You could only play freshman basketball.
Yeah.
You know, Bill Bradley played freshman basketball.
Right.
You know, so you played freshman basketball, and then your sophomore year you went in. So you at least had a year there. You know, can we deny people from making a living or these? Well, I can say this. The one and done rule has hurt the NBA. It hasn't helped it.
Yeah, it's kind of saturated with talent that's not physically or mentally
They're not
prepared.
ready. They're not ready mentally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not ready. Those 18, 19-year-old kids going into the NBA, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're playing, you know, I looked yesterday at the NCAA games, and I saw that kid from Duke that, you know, is probably the best player in the country.
Jabari Parker.
And Wiggins and stuff like that.
Andrew Wiggins.
Now, let's say that the Utah Jazz tomorrow got Wiggins. How many more games did they win?
Yeah.
He's not ready.
Right, yeah.
You know, and neither is Parker. Parker can't guard his lunch.
Right, yeah.
Don't quote me.
Yeah.
But that's the truth.
Okay, yeah, it's true.
Right,
It is
he's
true.
never had to do it.
Well, you heard Charles
Yeah.
Barkley. He says, well, if he's only going to get 6 points against Mercer, he ain't ready. And I was like,
Well,
Charles, I appreciate you being
so,
blunt
you know,
and
on the
honest.
other hand, you see LeBron James.
Oh, now that's a freak. He's a
Yeah,
freak.
well, you know, he gets out and he plays. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it or they couldn't do it. Baseball and hockey have been doing it for years.
Yeah.
Hockey, especially, they sign those young kids to the junior leagues up in Canada and what have you. I'm not saying whether it's right or it's wrong or what have you. But I think that the colleges themselves, and I'll start right with let's start with football. All right, too many games. 13 games. Now they're going to have playoff.
Yeah,
It's all about money.
yeah.
It's not for the benefits. Too many hits, too many practices, spring practice. Now, we used to have football players who ran track, played baseball, did all different things,
right.
you know. And so, you know, the Heisman Trophy winner this year is pitching for Florida State. The thing is that we're denying those kids an opportunity to expand their goals. So, you know, basketball. How many games in a row did Wichita State win? 35?
Yeah,
35 games.
35 and 0.
Then they played. Now, these are guys who are not, by the way, Ivy Leaguers.
Yeah.
And you mean to tell me that they can play 35, 36 games and still pass? Then you got to investigate the academic standards of Wichita State.
Interesting point.
I mean,
Interesting
how the
point,
heck
yeah.
can you miss that much school
Yeah.
and still get through class?
Sure.
So I mean, the administrators are foolish if they think that they're fooling society. Let's face it, it's about money, and unless you take the money out of it, then it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't. And so the kid who leaves early, all right, is and even says it. You know what? How if I'm a Kentucky fan and every year 4 of their players leave?
Yeah.
How can I be a fan of that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Or even locally, what happened here, we had 100-year rivalry between BYU and Utah, and we cut it off.
Yeah.
You know, as if it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But it really mattered to a lot of people. But it was all about the money.
Sure.
It's
Conference alignment and
Yeah,
greed and
conference
money.
alignment and everything else, and recruiting and all these other things. And they could still play. They could play each other the first game of the year.
Right.
You know, but
Yeah.
instead they want a cupcake. Everybody does that, and
Get those
and
wins, huh?
yeah, and that's a shame.
Yeah.
So you know, there has to be a hard look taken at the whole of intercollegiate sports before we get down to saying it's wrong for players to leave early. I mean, that's nothing compared to the whole package. The Ivy League comes about as close as anybody to doing it, no scholarships, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the military academies, I always thought in my own life, I would have loved to have coached at West Point for a couple of years. To have those kids who are future
Generals,
paratroopers,
right?
And very bright, and to coach them, you know, and I think that would have been something special. But you know, nowadays we're just building athletic machines, football, basketball, and the fans love it, and so they pay a lot of money to see the games, and we pay the coaches a lot of money, and life goes on. But and to answer your question, I wish the rules were different. I don't think that legally they can be different. I don't know how you deny a person from going out and making a living if he can do
Well, they can go to war at 18. Why would you know?
There's a lot of things. They certainly can go to war at 18, and it's almost like we have done is involving. Someone said to me, "Should we pay the players?" Definitely. So someone said, "Well, I don't have to pay the women." Well, no, only pay those who have income producing. If the gymnastic team fills the arena and they make money, then yes, the gymnastics people should get paid. And someone said, "Oh, you know, they get a scholarship and this and that." And I said, "That's a lot of baloney." You know what I mean? Why shouldn't they share in that? Some of them are going to end up with their brains scrambled.
Yeah.
You know, and die earlier than they probably should in their lives. And by the way, it's not like they're denying the money from the library or something. The money is going into athletics.
Right.
It's not going to the school.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, but yeah, on that question, right now I'm not ready to say that there's something wrong with the kid living. I'm on the side of the athlete in that case. It's interesting. The guy who was the first draft pick last year, the first player picked, I think for Cleveland, can't get a game. The kids that are coming in to the NBA, I think the quality of the NBA has come down somewhat. But the fans keep turning out. There's probably too many teams. You know, we'd be a little better if we had fewer teams.
A little saturated.
But I think there'll be teams in Europe before we know it, and there'll be teams in Asia before we know it. You know.
Yeah. Well, so, I knew we had a comment earlier, Coach, and thanks so much for all your wisdom and experience and the nuggets that you've shared with players and coaches who are viewing. A wealth of knowledge that you bring to the show tonight, and I thank you for that. One of the viewers in Indiana said that he'll always remember when Morgana come jogging across the floor and gave you a kiss.
By the way, there's going to be a special on Morgana. She's retired now.
Okay.
And she's a lovely little lady. She's lost a lot of weight and what have you. And they came to me and spent a whole day talking about her and about her life and what's going on. So look for it on ESPN. It's going to be on one of those, specials that they have.
Okay, yeah, a little documentary, a little 30 for 30 or something?
Yeah, like 30 for 30.
Outstanding.
Yeah, on her thing. And I always thought that part of it was important, that you should have fun.
Yeah.
And, in fact, when I quit coaching, and I mentioned before, I like baseball better than basketball.
Yeah.
It's a thinking man's game. And I like to sit back and spend the hours watching it. But I think that the idea, I lost my train of thought for a second, the idea that, I can't, what was I talking about before we started there? About, well, let's forget it.
Okay.
I can't think of the idea of having fun and
sure.
enjoying it. And what happened with me is I realized all of a sudden, and it's one of the regrets.
Is this like in 1989
yeah,
when you
I
stepped
quit.
aside? And
Yeah, I would have gone on a little longer. I wasn't that old, but the thing was that I was arguing with the refs a little bit too much. I regret that. And when you step aside and you look back, actually the refs do a pretty good job, very good job. I found that maybe I was spending too much time with the game and not enough time with my family. Mm-hmm. That was the other thing, the sacrifice. And there was no reason why I should do it over such a long period of time. So I advise coaches, you hear about coaches sleeping in their offices in the football season. Keep everything in perspective.
There you go.
And if you do, you'll be a better coach.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
You're not when you're going wacko on the bench, the refs are yelling at a player, you're losing your focus.
Sure.
And that's not right. The other thing is, there's a way too many guys that are mean. Mm-hmm. Coaches are mean. They have such an advantage over the kids. I thought it was Barkley said it very well when Bobby Knight strangled a kid in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And Barkley said, if that old man put his hands on me, they'd be getting his funeral ready the next day.
Yeah, sure.
So, you shouldn't be mean.
Yeah.
And I think, sometimes our coaches are, they take it out on players and stuff. And it should be fun. And there can be lessons learned.
That's right.
At a more moderate consideration.
Sure. Well, again, great nuggets there, Coach. And, I'll never forget one afternoon, we were sitting in the Jazz practice facility. They're at Zion's Bank practice facility. And a friend had come in, and I think there was a guy there from Chile and another guy. And you had introduced me to one of your friends, and you said, the best unemployed coach in America. And it meant a lot to me that you thought that much of me. And I've always respected, your mentorship and your friendship and the advice that you've given me for years, because I've always called you and sought your counsel, and for that I am eternally grateful, and I appreciate it.
You wait, things come to you. Maybe the Lord has other routes for you to take.
Yes, sir.
And so that's important. I do a lot of motivational speaking to companies and stuff like that. And I had a man come up to me one time and say, I wasn't good enough, big enough, strong enough, or a good enough player to have been an athlete. Mm-hmm. He said, but thank you for this afternoon. Wow. He said, I think you made up for it.
Yeah.
What you told us.
Don't you? Because I remember you had a business card a few years back, and it was Frankly Speaking.
Yeah.
And where you do motivational and inspirational speaking.
How? And on the other side, I used to have, you can't quit. It's a league rule.
There you go.
That was Brian Piccolo.
Yeah.
And I say about athletics and the athletes that are out here, mm-hmm. is that how much do you love to play, or do you play for the wrong reasons? To be a pro, to do this, do that. Brian Piccolo was dying of cancer, and George Hallis went to him and said, you can travel around the world, you can do anything with your life you want, and we'll pay for it. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to play football. He said, I'll be at practice tomorrow.
There you go.
And so what happened was he died. He died a year later, but he was doing what he wanted to do. So I always ask the people who come to listen to my seminars to say to them, if you found out you had cancer, would you go to work again tomorrow, or would you take off? Mm-hmm. If the answer is you would take off, then quit your job and do something else.
Oh, I like it.
But if you love your job, Mother Teresa tells us if you love your work, you'll never be a slave.
There you go.
And so
amen to that.
That's important.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
How can our viewers get in contact with you? Do you have like a website, or is there like an email address?
I
Or
don't do anything, just, if, what can I say? I can't even work my phone. You know what I mean? This thing is too confusing. I'll tell you what, get in touch with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys want to have,
I get about 20 letters a week from around the world, and there's two things they do. They either saw the blooper tapes.
okay, yeah, with Marv Albert.
I had a woman in Israel who was teaching Israelis how to speak English. She was using the tape to in the classroom for them to see it. And the Israelis like basketball, so she was using that. She wrote to tell me. But most of the people are, I don't know whether they're people who are physically and mentally challenged, or they're maybe shut-ins, they're older people. But I get these letters from people saying, we remember you as a coach, and we remember Morgana, or we remember this and that, when you combed your hair on Riley, and would you please sign your card and send it back?
Wow.
And so, that to me is very comforting. And the past week, when we had we honored the team 30 years ago that was the first Jazz team never go to the playoffs, and really were the cornerstone for their future successes. It was wonderful to hear people say, boy, I remember when you were coaching, and that was a lot of fun.
There you go.
We enjoyed those days.
That's entertainment, right? Sports entertainment.
It makes it all worthwhile.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes you think, people don't care, I'm not appreciated. And on the hand, it might be the other way. We have a tendency to react to the critics than to the people who really love you.
Yeah, yes, sir. Well, if you guys want to get in touch with Coach Frank Layden, frankly speaking, he will come out and give a wealth of knowledge to any organization or group. Contact us right here. You can contact me, Scott_Fields, and we will get in touch with the coach for you, and we'll make sure that you guys have the contact, because how lucky are we today to have him right here with us and share his time and his knowledge and expertise. And I can't thank you enough, my friend. I look forward to going to some more baseball games with you and let you sing.
Fun.
You sing that 7th inning stretch. Take me out to the ball game, and we'll get some lunches and dinners in together, buddy.
Yep. That was, people asked me about basketball. I said, what the greatest thrill I ever had in sports? All right, and I played in the Yankee Stadium, I played in Ebbets Field, I had all these things. But you know what my greatest thrill was? Singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" at Wrigley Field.
There you go. How about that?
The Cubs called me and asked me to go in. And
was Harry Carey there also?
Harry Carey died.
Okay,
that's why they do it now. They bring in a different person. Skip Carey, not Skip Carey, but Chip Carey was the broadcast. Skip died. He was with the Hawks when I was with the Hawks. But Skip Carey and what's his name, Ron Santo, were the broadcasters, and they sang "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
That's awesome.
Going home, and this will be my last thing. Going home, we were on the train going to the middle of Chicago, and some guy said, "Hey, Layden, you sing a lot better than you can coach."
That's great.
Chicago, what can I say?
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you. I think the world of you, and I'm blessed to be able to call you a friend. And again, thank you for your mentorship and all the advice that you've given me, because I've grown a lot personally and professionally from it. So thank you, and
thank you very much.
give Barbara my best.
Yes, I sure will.
Okay.